Welcome to the Urbanist Agenda, the podcast that likes its e-bikes. I am Jason from Not Just Bikes, and I'm joined once again by American Fietser. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Jason. You can call me Brandon or American Fietser.
Hi, Brandon.
Yeah. All right. How's it going? Let's talk about e-bikes.
Yeah, so we're here to talk about e-bikes. That's such a big, wide topic, but I think there's a bunch of interesting things we can talk about here because one of the things that I really notice is like the difference in e-bikes in North American context and e-bikes in a Dutch context. I think they're very different. And anyway, there's lots to talk about there. But of course, you ride an e-bike quite regularly. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, my main goal is to do away with this whole 15-minute city nonsense because we just can't have that. And with bringing e-bikes into the world, we can now expand out to 30-minute cities. Okay.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Yes. Yeah, I think that vibes a little bit more with the anti-15-minute city agenda. So 30-minute cities now with e-bikes. Where do we go from here?
So you ride an Urban Arrow cargo bike most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Is your other bike an e-bike as well?
I don't have another bike because I'm very practical. I want one bike and that is it.
Oh, you used to have like a work cycles, right?
Okay, so let's lay this out and why I'm Ebike-pilled, all right?
Right. All right. Let's hear this.
Okay, let me just start by saying if it weren't for e-bikes, I'd drive a car all the time.
Yep.
Especially because I live in North America, right? So I run into people all the time that I get other advocates that love to say, whenever I'll post e-bike content, they'll say, well, you know, regular bikes too. I'm like, no, I don't think so. Because if regular acoustic bikes were the answer, I don't think we'd be where we are today. And if acoustic bikes were the only option out there, again, I'd be a motorist. My wife would be a motorist. And a lot of other people I know would be motorists because there's just too much sprawl. There's too much bad infrastructure. E-bikes are not an equalizer, but they're a Band-Aid on sprawl and a Band-Aid on bad infrastructure. So after I got Dutch-pilled back in 2017, I wanted to emulate their lifestyle. I ordered my first bike. It was a Gazelle Tour Populaire. And it was a cool bike, but it was an acoustic bike and it just had a little rear rack. And I got it. I spent a bunch of money on it. And then I was just like, nah, this is no good. So went to another bike, got my first work cycles bike, but it came acoustic. And I tried to ride it to the grocery store and thought, that's too much work. So I went on this little adventure to figure out how can I put a Bafang on here, a mid-drive, and make this into an e-bike. Worked with a bike shop in Wisconsin, and we made it happen. And it was kind of a Frankenstein thing, and really this motor had no business being on this particular bike, but it did it. And it showed me, okay, I just need some help, and then I can make this work.
Right.
So that went on to another work cycles bike, and then obviously I've had some Urban Arrows. My wife has a Turn HSD e-cargo bike, and they're what make it happen. So they're there to flatten hills, calm winds, make up for lost energy, whatever excuse you want to, pull out. They minimize it, if not completely erase it.
Yeah, I found the same thing happened with us in Toronto because when we moved to Toronto, we used to live in Europe and a few different places. Then we moved back to Canada in late 2013, I think it was. And I had my bike that I had bought in Belgium, just an acoustic bike. And I would ride it to work sometimes. But it's tough, Like, it's just not the same in North America. And Toronto's better than a lot of cities in North America. But still, like, you got to keep up with cars sometimes, too, right? Like, you can't just be throttling along. You really do have to be moving. And I think that's one thing that's just very different here in the Netherlands, where I think the average speed in Amsterdam is 16 kilometers an hour. And in Toronto, if you're going 16, like, you're in trouble, actually, like not only from like motorists, but also people on bikes coming behind you, even just on racing bikes. It's just everything's faster there. Everything is faster. And you're expected to go faster. You can't just be throttling along on a quiet city street when some driver comes up behind you. You got to move. So everything is about that. But I also found that like we ended up buying an e-bike for the same reason. I can't even remember which one was first, but there were a few of them that we had. We had an Azor. We tried to get a work cycles, but they couldn't ship the e-bikes over due to like the batteries and stuff, and they wouldn't ship it. So we got an Azor that was retrofitted similar to what you described by a local company. And we had that as an e-bike, bit of a Frankenstein thing with a Bafang motor. We had the e-cargo bike too, the Babu City E. But that was funny too, because again, that talks to, well, maybe I'll get to that in a bit, but the motor was way underpowered because it was clearly designed for the Netherlands and not for Toronto. So we had to get that upgraded. But what I did find is once we got those e-bikes, like I was still shopping for cars when we bought that cargo bike. And I think I talked about that in my video about it. Like we moved back and I figured we had to get a car, right? So I was shopping, like literally test driving cars. I had a list, a spreadsheet and stuff. I was like planning on buying a car. We didn't have the money for it at the time. We were planning on buying a car. We ended up buying this e-cargo bike, which was like pretty expensive for the electric thing and to buy it in North America in 2000, whatever it was, 14, I think it was by that time. But I think the difference between a cargo bike and an electric cargo bike is that like just a regular cargo bike, yeah, maybe that's okay here in the Netherlands. I know it's okay here in the Netherlands. But in Canada, like the e-cargo bike becomes a car replacement. A normal cargo bike is not a car replacement. An e-cargo bike legitimately can be a car replacement. And it was for us, even though we were a family with 2 kids. Like it made me stop shopping for cars. Let's put it that way. And I actually never owned a car again. So when people are negative about e-bikes, I'm like, come on, guys, like get with it. This is ridiculous. I would have been a driver in Toronto if it wasn't for electric cargo bike.
And the whole, well, I mean, you've come a long way. Geez, you talk about buying that back in 2014.
Yeah. It was rare too. Like
Very
nobody knew what they were. The only reason we knew them is because we had lived in Belgium and gone to the Netherlands a bunch of times and were familiar with them. But they were super rare. And there was one store that had just started selling them, like literally just started selling them. I think it was the only place in Canada, or certainly the only one anywhere near Toronto. And yeah, they were super, super rare. But we wanted to make that happen because we had seen it happen. We wanted to do the same thing in Canada.
I don't even think I knew that they existed, although at the time I didn't care about bikes or urbanism or anything like that. So how would I have
Back
known?
when you were a truck driver, but we have a previous episode about that.
Yeah. And to touch on that, I remember for a while, 2018, 2019, whatever. I remember there was still a lot of infighting in the biking community. You had a lot of people that loved to yell cheater and stuff like that.
I used to get that all the time.
But I think that's died off. I think that is kind of gone now because we've at least managed to evolve past the discussion of bikes are supposed to be about getting exercise or whatever else. I'm glad that's gone, but that was big for a while.
It was for sure. Like that whole idea of cheating. And I'm like, cheating what, dude? I'm dropping my kids off at daycare. Like, fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that always blew my mind. But yeah, it was definitely absolutely a thing because the only people on the road, well, I mean, the fact is it was just so dangerous that you had to really love bikes to be on the road. And it was only just barely starting to change as we were there in 2014 that people like us were cycling, not because we cared about bikes, but just because it was a very easy, cheap way to get around. Like when we moved from Europe back to Canada, we didn't have a huge amount of money. Like moving country is very expensive. And I had found a job, but my wife wasn't working yet. And I wasn't making a fantastic salary compared to even what I was making in Europe. And it just wasn't the time that we could blow a bunch of cash, buy a car and all this stuff. And so this provided us with that opportunity to save a ton of money getting around in an expensive city like Toronto.
Yeah. One more thing to add to that was, back whenever there was the whole thing about, oh, you're cheating and whatnot. Before then, anybody on 2 wheels on public infrastructure, it was largely men. And yeah, they were out there because they loved bikes. They loved bikes as sport or, as, I don't know, maybe some sort of macho twist to it too. But that, again, I think I don't see it that much anymore. It's kind of gone,
It's really nice.
Yeah. So the demographics are definitely changing. And I think we have e-bikes to thank for that, especially cargo bikes. And I wanted to get into this because the other day, the Brontlets posted a photo, a good photo, as they always do.
Yeah.
And I caught it because it was the typical Dutch photo, like beautiful infrastructure. This white-haired lady, maybe, I don't know, probably in her 70s or whatever, on a bike with some panniers on it, and obviously coming from the grocery store or whatever else. But you know what was different about this same typical thing that you always see in a photo of cycling people from the Netherlands? This lady was on an e-bike.
Hmm.
You're starting to just be able to look out over the Dutch, the Netherlands, and there's a lot of e-bikes out there, which brings up the question, why? And is the density and the infrastructure, is that not the whole package? Because if the Dutch are choosing e-bikes, well, there's obviously more to it.
Yeah, there's a few things there. Like, what's interesting is that in Toronto, I started riding an acoustic bike when we first moved back and then switched to an e-bike and then rode an e-bike all the time because I was going much farther distances. Even going to my work, I remember if I went the shortest route, it was about 5 kilometers, but I couldn't do that because it was too dangerous. So I had to go on protected bike paths and it was about a little over 7 kilometers. So I had to add an extra 2 kilometers to my route just so that I didn't die, which is bullshit. That should never happen, but that was just the case. And so
Yeah.
7 kilometers is getting up there. You know, like I know there'll be a million people who are like, I can do that. I do 7 kilometers. I do more than twice that every day. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Like I'm dropping my kid off at daycare and then I'm going to work and then I'm doing a whole day of work and I'm going home. And I don't want to deal with that. So I was always on an e-bike. Here in the Netherlands, actually, I almost always ride the Im Fiets. It doesn't even have any gears. That's what I prefer. It gives me some exercise. I like it. It's super easy to lock up. I don't have to worry about it getting stolen. So I ride the Im Fiets like basically everywhere. But at the same time, even if I'm going kind of far, it's like 3 kilometers. Like most of my trips are under 3 kilometers on beautiful bike paths. I can take the shortest route. I can take the scenic route. Doesn't matter. It's all safe. And so I do that. My wife very often rides an e-bike, especially if she's going to work and is wearing like her work clothes and, you know, suit and everything. She just prefers it. She also says there's a lot of wind here. And
There's a lot of wind.
She's like, fuck it. I don't want to deal with the wind. I'm riding the e-bike.
Mm-hmm.
E-bikes are definitely exploding here. Some good, some bad. When it comes to older people, like you mentioned in the Brentlands photo, e-bikes are becoming extremely popular. And I think it's because the thing is everybody rides bikes here, right? It's certainly not just the middle-aged men in Lycra kind of thing by any stretch of the imagination. As soon as you're like 4 years old, you're riding a bike. And people ride bikes well into their 80s too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's actually safe to do. And so it's very much a lifetime thing. But when people start getting in their 60s and 70s, they've been riding bikes their whole life, but it just becomes more difficult, right? And so we are seeing, especially as the price of these e-bikes comes down. And I mean, I see e-bikes for sale at the grocery store sometimes too. Like I went to one of the larger grocery stores a few years ago and they had a sale on an e-bike and it was like 500 euros or something like that. And just there at the grocery store, you could literally just buy it and like walk out with it.
Uh-huh.
You know, need help getting your groceries home? There's your e-bike. So they're everywhere. They're becoming quite a bit cheaper. And what we're seeing is that older people here in the Netherlands just don't want to deal with it anymore when they're like 70 years old. They just want to ride an e-bike. And so we are seeing that quite a bit.
Yeah, so two things on what you just talked about. I don't have the specific study, but they were bringing up stats from whenever people were mostly on acoustic bikes. Trips averaged around 3 kilometers, I think, but maxed out at 7 on average. Like that 7 kilometers was the furthest that most people would be willing to ride on an acoustic bike. However, once e-bikes came on the scene, that pretty much doubled to 15 kilometers.
Yeah. And I mean, that does make a big difference. And this is one of these things, again, when people are negative about e-bikes, I'm like, come on, guys. Because Brent Todarian loves to post about this all the time, too, that people ride farther on e-bikes. So it's not just that, like, people ride the same distance and faster, or that they just do it so that they're being lazy or something. It's not that at all. When people get e-bikes, they ride faster. And I think we're absolutely seeing that in the Netherlands, where the e-bikes are being used by people who are doing trips they would have done with their car. Because the thing is, the Netherlands has awesome roads. You know, I've talked about this in previous videos and stuff.
Yeah.
It's really easy to drive a car here. Most households have a car because Dutch people are relatively wealthy and cars are a luxury and they just buy it. They'll use bikes all the time for getting around town, but they will have a car and they'll use it if they need to go somewhere farther. And I think what we're seeing is the e-bikes are causing those people to take their e-bike more often. And here, you know, you'll have towns here where people traditionally would cycle in their local town, but there are great ways to cycle between towns here as well, right? And so you can do long distance bike rides here. very, very easily to the next town over. So if you have a friend, family member in the next town over, you could drive there, but you could also just ride a bike on a really nice, totally separated path, totally separated from the way the cars go. And I think I'm seeing, if I go out to those like rural areas or the areas between cities, it's full of e-bikes. It's absolutely
Yep.
full of e-bikes. People of all ages, certainly seniors as well, and they're using them for this purpose.
And if you think about this from some other beneficial angles, which the Netherlands will benefit from here now, not so much here in the US or Canada, but these e-bikes are taking pressure off of your transit system, right? Because you have a public health system, it's also, there's that physical benefit from people moving their bodies, right? So they're
Yeah.
cycling more, therefore, hopefully having better health outcomes and taking pressure off of your healthcare system as well. So it's less people hopping on the trains, crowding the trains because they think, I'll take the e-bike over, from Den Bosch to Utrecht or whatever else,
Yeah.
instead of, I have to get on the train because there's no way I'm acoustic biking that
Yeah.
unless you're bicycle Dutch and have something to prove.
We saw this in Toronto too. Toronto, oh man, Toronto has such potential. It's wasted. Don't get me into it. This isn't an RM Transit one, so I could, we'll do that on our RM Transit episode. But Toronto's transit system is really just rammed full a lot of the time. The streetcars are way too slow because they get stuck in traffic. It's a load of bullshit. I'm not going to get into it. But the e-bikes have definitely helped with that too, to take off stress from the transit system. Like the Line 1 subway is just rammed at rush hour. And it has helped since they've installed bike lanes. Now, Doug Ford is desperately trying to get rid of them, but they are legitimately easing up transit service. And the thing is, there are certainly people who switch from car to e-bike, but in Toronto, I can tell you there are absolutely people who switch from transit to e-bike, and then there are people who switch from car to transit. And so when you free up the transit space, you're still going to get more people moving from cars to transit to that space that's now freed up now that it's not unpleasant to take the subway. It's not rammed full anymore. So yeah, there are huge benefits to this all around. And again, I do think e-bikes make a big difference here. They just get rid of a lot of the excuses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even when it comes to infrastructure, they get rid of the excuses because it used to be 10, 15 years ago, people used to always say, we can't have bikes here. You can only do that in flat places like the Netherlands. That whole hilly flat discussion is basically gone. Like occasionally
gone.
people still make it, but it's almost completely gone. And I will tell you, that used to be a major, major issue. Now it's always weather, right? People find something new to bitch about.
Mm-hmm.
But it used to be that they would be like hills, can't bike, period.
Yep.
But now with e-bikes, people are like, what are you talking about? Like hills are irrelevant. Like it's flatten the hills.
Yeah, that argument used to come up all the time as if we all live in the Alps.
Yeah, and then when you go to Switzerland, they're riding bikes all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And sure, you run into some places where, take San Francisco, for example, a certain e-bike brand or company, however it's powered, it may not work out so well there, but there are plenty of options that can flatten San Francisco in their own way. So yeah, that's definitely gone. And we were talking about how these e-bikes can take pressure off of transit, all forms of transit, even buses, or, if you just want to get into the whole, let's look at New York, if they would actually get to where they want to take active infrastructure seriously and make it so people can bike and remove some of the threats of cars, New York won't need as many cars or as many cabs or as many Ubers or whatever else, because people can now get around safely and more efficiently and easier, no matter what they're wearing, no matter their energy level, on acoustic bikes, but especially enabled by e-bikes. And there's e-bike share as well. So, I mean, micromobility is coming up with solutions. No, it came up with solutions. The problem is just still the fucking cars and the lack of infrastructure. And if we could just sort those two tiny issues out, then we've got the wheels to get things done that don't have to weigh, 2 tons and be shaped like a wedge.
And New York is ridiculous. I was there, a year and a half ago or something now. And I hadn't been there for quite a long time. And I took the city bikes. They were great. But boy, you still got to be brave to cycle in New York City. And that really, really should not be the case. I've heard it's improving with congestion charging now that they finally put that in. I really hope they can keep that because traffic volumes are way down. They've got lots of money for the subway now. Like there's so many opportunities now. And there's so much space in Manhattan. The roads are huge. There's so much space for like incredibly fantastic bicycle infrastructure if they can just do it. And I know they're improving, but it's still tricky for sure.
Yeah. Another place I look at is Chicago too. Like, again, it's the fucking cars. Chicago's amazing. I've never been to New York, so I can't say much about New York, but I feel that Chicago is the best city in all of the United States. I just think it has so much damn character that every single time that I'm there, the only thing that ruins it for me is that it's dominated by cars. It's
Yeah.
just dissected and bisected by highways cosplaying the streets.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Shit, we got on infrastructure. We're here for e-bikes. But anyway, yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You see how this spider webs off.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. Anyway, back to e-bikes.
Back to e-bikes. Okay, hey, let's talk about e-bikes a little bit more, and let's stay on North America for a minute because the Dutch have it figured out. You guys don't even need help anymore.
Well,
So,
there are some issues with e-bikes, but we'll get to that maybe later
oh
on.
yeah, we will get there actually, especially because it has the name Fat Bikes, and North America seems to think that's something different. But one thing I'm noticing over here is that the US, and I think I can speak for Canada as well, is that, oh shit, am I going to get yelled at for saying that? I feel like
Yes.
I am.
Never 51, elbows up.
There's an outdated perception of bikes here because I am constantly being stopped and inquisitively asked, what is that? When I'm on my Urban Arrow, for example, what is that? Or did you build that? And I'm just thinking,
I used to get that too. Did you build that yourself? And I'm like, yeah, my name's Babu.
yeah, it happens all the time. And it's coming from, I mean, it's not just coming from older people or younger people, it's coming from everybody. I think a lot of people just have this 1985 10-speed drop bar vision of bicycles
Yeah.
and no clue whatsoever about what's in the marketplace today and what they can do, and keeping up the status quo idea of, oh, yeah, bikes are neat recreation, but they could never be transportation over here. So what do you think about the perception of people, at least over here, towards bikes?
Well, I would say that I saw that change quite significantly in Toronto. We moved back very late 2013 and we left permanently to go to the Netherlands in summer of 2018. So I guess a little over 4 years that we were there. And I saw that change even in that time. Of course, we lived in there earlier, like when I was living in Toronto, like 2003, and bikes were really weird, like really, really, really weird. I biked to work a little bit in that time only because like the streetcar was so ridiculously painfully slow, but it was super uncommon to ride a bike. And I wasn't really even that keen on it. I was just doing it because it was like, what the hell else am I going to do to get around? It's a horrible place to get around because there's so much traffic, streetcars stuck in traffic, bikes are too dangerous. But we saw it change quite a lot. So when we first moved back, there was still that kind of like, it's cheating if you're riding an e-bike thing. It was all weird. Once we got the cargo bike, everyone's like, did you build that yourself? Like, what is that thing? Where did you get it? Lots and lots of questions. But even by the time we left, we weren't getting those questions nearly as often. There were still some people who were surprised, but it was becoming a lot more common. There were now a few bike shops that were selling e-cargo bikes. The Urban Arrows were becoming quite popular. And I mean, this is all relative basis. You're still talking like small numbers, but in downtown Toronto, some of the mode share was getting up there. Like some of the neighborhoods had like 20% of people going to work by bike and stuff like that. So it was a non-trivial number of people, and it was becoming a lot more normalized. And I think the thing is, when it comes to that attitude, it really just goes away as soon as the infrastructure is safe and normal people start coming out. Like as soon as it's safe enough to feel like you can put your kids in a cargo bike and take them to daycare or school, then all of that stuff just disappears. And it goes really fast too, I would say. The change in people's perception goes very, very quickly. Like Toronto still has the issue that the people in the suburbs are still living in the 1960s, but in downtown Toronto, it's very much recognized that utility cycling is a thing. E-bikes are a big part of that, absolutely for sure. But it also just comes from safer infrastructure, because when it's dangerous to go out there, the only people who are going to ride bikes are like daredevils, crazy people, because you'd have to be insane to ride a bicycle when it's dangerous. And so it's not really surprising that cyclists get this sort of idea, because like who would be insane enough to ride a bike?
Well, Jason, the best way I've ever heard that put is it's only good enough for people who are comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it.
And we know who that is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I used to say to people in the early days when I was cycling, when it was dangerous, and sometimes I wouldn't cycle, it was too dangerous. And people would say, like, oh, these cyclists are crazy. And I'd be like, would you cycle here? No. I'm like, yeah, you'd have to be crazy to ride a bike here, right? Like, that's why the only people you see cycling are crazy. It's really that simple. And then once it became safer, yeah, then you're seeing like women in dresses and a big straw hat, like with a baguette and flowers in the basket. So it
Yeah.
does change very quickly.
And that's another thing too, is touching back on the perception or the education on what bikes are and what they can do and what they can be. You know, the Dutch know that they're transportation, but over here, we've lost a lot of that. And something I notice on Dutch television, because I occasionally download commercials from YouTube and post them, is that bikes are very visible in TV shows, movies, advertisements that come out of the Netherlands. I love seeing some of the bike shop TV commercials. I can't even imagine a bike shop TV commercial on American or Canadian television, but they're often framed as this is transportation and the person is dressed as such and it's the upright, comfortable position. And I'm seeing that with e-bike commercials now out of the Netherlands. And of course, that contributes to the Dutch knowing the ins and outs of the bike marketplace. But here, the only advertising we have is brought on by exactly what you were saying earlier, the people that are now more comfortable biking, that are riding these e-bikes and these e-cargo bikes by taking their kids to school, or for example, they're being seen in the school drop-off, right? And that's about the only form of advertisement that we have over here. Otherwise, there's no magazine ads or TV commercials or whatever else for bikes as transportation. I mean, they're not even there for sports bikes. So that's definitely a contributing factor to why people just are running a baseline ignorance on the state of bikes in the 2020s.
Well, you know, the automobile industry is one of the largest advertisers out there. You know, if you get any newspaper, they'll have an auto section, and that's not because people love cars. That's because car companies pay them a shit ton of money to have an auto section. They are almost always one of the biggest advertising buyers, whether that's TV, whether that's print, or whether it's movies too. I mean, how many times have you watched a movie and if you see a car logo in a movie, they paid to have that there every single time without fail. If they don't pay, they take the logos off the cars they use, right? So if you see the logo and you know, you'll be watching and suddenly the car pulls up and it just pulls up perfectly into the frame. There's that logo right there. Like those companies are paying for all that.
Yeah.
When they do car chases, they're paying for that stuff. Like movies will get paid to put a car chase in a movie. Even if there doesn't need to be a car chase, they'll get paid to put it in and they'll be given the cars by whatever company. They all do it. And that will be effectively a paid sponsorship. And I love that they don't have to disclose those, but I do on YouTube, but that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, there's entire franchises built around it, like the Fast and the Furious. I mean,
Yeah.
what do we got? Are we going to have a franchise built around people on e-cargo bikes called like the Smug and the Entitled or something?
Exactly. You know, it's funny though. I was actually talking to Dave from Nebula, and Nebula is starting to do more like TV shows and stuff like this. And I was talking to him about this fact that like cars are in everything and TV shows are paid to put car ads in them effectively. And entire scripts are written around the car. There are some ridiculous examples of this that I should really make a video about someday where they stands out so much. You're like, this is gross. That like I'm watching a car ad in the middle of this TV show. But anyway.
It happens in Brazil. I see it in because my wife watches novellas. The novellas are now chock full of subtle ads, and a lot of them is for BYD.
Oh, wow.
China is invading Brazil with BYD.
Yeah, I'm seeing them more often here too.
Right in the middle of the novella, everybody's driving a BYD, and then like this guy goes and picks up his girlfriend. She gets in and she's messing around with the display panel, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is this and this." So neat. It's not like this is an advertisement, but that's an advertisement.
Of course, it's an advertisement. They absolutely paid to have it written that way. And again, I think it's gross that they don't have to disclose that. But every time I talk about anything on YouTube, there's a billion laws around it, but whatever. But as I was saying, I was talking to Dave from Nebula about this, and I was like, wouldn't it be great if like we could just get bicycles and public transit properly written into scripts as a good thing? Like, I would love to see, you're just watching a normal sitcom and they're at the office and they're like, hey, let's go over here. And the one guy's like, oh, but there's 6 of us and I only got 5 room in my car. He's like, that's fine. I'll take my bike. And he gets there first. And the guys show up and he's already there. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm on my second drink or whatever. You know, they could just throw stuff like that in. Wouldn't that be wonderful if we could get like bike sponsorships in there or
Yes,
like
yeah.
bike placements in a good way?
But you see how they do it already in Hollywood. It's anybody that gets on a bike looks like this clumsy
Yeah, he's
infant
the weirdo and he's got weird clothes and he's got this like giant
shaking.
helmet and like, yeah, it's always, always, always projected as a bad thing that they did this.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine somebody just hopping on one of those nice gazelles or an urban arrow or whatever else and just being normal,
Yeah,
going down.
not getting stuck in traffic,
Yeah. Yeah.
getting there first, you know, being
I think a
healthy.
good place to start would be, yeah, Hallmark movies, man. They already got the urbanism. Now we just need the e-bikes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh, it's the perfect place for it because right now, yeah, let's go down that road. Hallmark movies, you ever see, don't a lot of those take place up in like some of these really quaint towns in Canada or something like that? And it's always
Well,
walkable.
I have to say, I don't watch Hallmark movies, but I
Oh,
know what you're talking about.
okay.
What was it? Was it Gilmore Girls or something that takes
Yeah.
place in that little town that would never exist because,
Hmm.
like, it would have been driven out of business by Walmart and the zoning
Hmm.
would be illegal? And
Yeah.
I mean, they do those things all the time, right?
And there's people always walking around, but the cars are never like the big behemoths. It's this guy, his wife died. He's a single dad and he drives this like 1952 pickup truck that's all shined up and nice. But why not have the dude on some Turn GSD or an Urban Arrow taking his kid to
Exactly, right?
school? I think that's a good place to go. Yeah. So I like that. So yeah, we need to get more of these in front of faces, but I just don't see it happening over here the same way you guys have it in your media in the Netherlands. It's just going to come by being seen in the streets.
Yeah, I mean, the reason it's part of the media here, though, is just it's a normal thing to do, right? Like, it's something insane. Like, over 80% of people ride bicycles here at least once a week. Like, even if they drive a car to work all the time, whatever, they're still going to get on their bike at least once a week. I
Mm-hmm.
know lots and lots and lots and lots of people with cars, and they still ride their bikes because it's faster and more convenient. And this is one of those things I talk about all the time, right? There's not really that many car people and bike people and train people. It's really just like, the vast majority of people don't care. They'll just do whatever's most convenient, whatever's fastest, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah. And that's why it's so frustrating to me because a lot of the time in the discussions in North America, it's always talked about as like, we're building these for cyclists and all this money is going to cyclists and cyclists are only a tiny part of the population. Why are we spending all this money on these cyclists? And we know it's not about that at all. When you build this stuff and it's safe and it's convenient, everybody starts doing it. Like they really do. It takes some time to get past those like cultural issues and things like that. But they really, I saw that change happen myself in downtown Toronto. And it can happen anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It really can happen. And it's just so frustrating because, of course, you're not building protected bike lanes for the people who are biking today. You're building it for the people who aren't biking today because it's not safe. And that's really lost in every single conversation ever in North America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had somebody point out because I wanted people to give me ideas of what they wanted us to talk about here. So I asked on Blue Sky, and one person had said something about talk about the joys of e-bikes, but something that they thought was interesting was what they called the spouse in a basket effect, which they probably caught from a lot of stuff that I post because I haul my wife everywhere in the Urban Arrow.
Right.
And normally we're going out to eat or something, so we're dressed halfway nice, and that's a head turner. People from all demographics are smiling, looking, commenting, asking questions. You'd really be surprised how people react to two grown-ass adults on one bicycle going to dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is that I almost never see adults in a bakfiets in the Netherlands. Actually, to be honest, I don't see bakfiets in that often in the grand scheme of things. Ever since our kids are no longer in elementary school, basisschool, I used to see them all the time then. But now that they're in high school, I can go several days without seeing a bakfiets at all.
Are you sure you're not just looking for them? Like you're no longer looking for them because
And they're just there all the time.
Yeah, and all of Bicycle Dutch's videos and all like Thomas Schleiper comes there occasionally. I don't know if you know who he is.
You do see them for sure, but I'll tell you, like outside of elementary schools, they're not super common. Now, two people riding on a bicycle, you see all the time. And it's all kinds of bicycles. They'll be sitting on the rear rack. I see people sitting on the front rack. I'm like, I don't know how you do that. Like having a lot of weight in your front rack is difficult. I see people sitting on like the bar in the center on a man's bike too. And I'm like, also, don't know how you do that. But riding
Mm-mm.
two people on a bicycle is super, super common here. And it always
Yeah.
does make me smile when I see it. Usually the people are having a lot of fun. Like I
Yeah.
never see anyone doing that and not smiling. Although occasionally I'll see like teenagers doing it and the person on the back's just like looking at their phone, like just casually
Yeah.
looking at their phone while they're sitting on the back of somebody else's bike.
But isn't that cool though, how
Yes.
casual it is? Because it's just normal. They're like, oh, this is so, I'm with my friend, I'm riding on the back of the bike. They're just
Yeah.
like, we're going someplace together on one bike. Well,
Yeah.
this happened to us the other evening a few weeks ago. First time we've actually done this specific thing. My wife's at the gym. I get a phone call and she's like, I have a flat tire. Okay. And she has a Turn HSD. So it's a sizable bike, right? And she's like, I can just walk it home. I'm like, no, because I'm a cargo biker. I'm insane. I'm like, oh, an opportunity to haul something way too big? Yeah, hold on. So I hop on the Urban Arrow, grab a ton of straps, ride to the gym. We load the Turn HSD up in the Urban Arrow. And then how do we get home? Because there's no more room up front. She sits on the back rack.
Right.
And we're riding home. I'm hauling her e-cargo bike. I got her on the back. Every damn person we encountered on that trail, which was a lot of people, smiles and stares and waves and more smiles. It's great. And again, I couldn't have done that on an acoustic cargo bike. I wouldn't have. So yeah, something about e-bikes and e-cargo bikes, they make you want to put something in there and do something with it.
Well, it does make everything easier.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, like even going shopping and stuff like that. And I'll take our buck feeds. We don't use our buck feeds as much anymore now that the kids are older. But, I still use it for like hauling stuff out to the recycling depot and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just, there's so much more convenient to be able to haul stuff. And I do find that the e-bike just makes you do things you wouldn't have thought to do. Like you just wouldn't have done that trip if it wasn't for the e-bike. And if you have a car, you take the car, right?
Yep.
It's really that simple.
And let's go on here to do things that you wouldn't do. That includes behaving poorly, right?
Yes.
E-bikes are definitely, or e-bikes or various versions of what people like to call e-bikes are definitely getting the waters a little bit muddied by bad actors on our infrastructure. And that's especially rearing its ugly head in the Netherlands with the fat bikes. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I will first say that there are some places that are worse. Like I find the e-bikes are still relatively regulated here in the Netherlands and in Europe in general. The e-bikes are usually limited to 25 kilometers an hour here. And we can get into like when that doesn't happen.
Right.
I noticed that like when I was in New York, and I hear from friends in New York that it is a bit of a shit show there because the e-bike regulations in North America are a lot less strict. And even then, I think like there's a lot of places where you can go like 35, 37, 40 kilometers an hour in different places. And that's getting really, really fast. New York has issues with delivery e-bikes just whipping down the streets, and they're in a rush. They're being timed for how quickly they can deliver. And so they've got immense pressure on them to ride as fast as possible and to hit as many doors as possible and deliveries as possible. And, bike couriers, I remember even in Toronto, like 30 years ago, were a crazy bunch of people, but they were on acoustic bikes. With e-bikes, it just becomes off the charts. And when you've got like your Uber Eats app that's like judging you on how quickly you do things, and you could very easily lose your job if you're not fast enough, it becomes a whole other issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, we have issues in the Netherlands, but I find in some places in North America, it's even worse. At least here, we have those regulations on the bike. So here in the Netherlands, there are actually kind of two types of e-bikes. The standard e-bike that everybody talks about here in Europe, it's mostly harmonized across Europe, but it's a little bit different from country to country. It's mostly 250 watts maximum, which is really not that much, especially for a cargo bike, and 25 kilometers per hour maximum speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
And every e-bike you buy here, for the most part, has that wattage of motor and that speed limitation. And so that generally keeps things sane. Again, like the average speed in Amsterdam, I said, was around 16 kilometers an hour, 25 is a little bit on the fast side. I mean, it still feels slow when I go to Toronto, it's like everybody's going 30 kilometers an hour.
Mm-hmm.
But 25 still kind of feels like it could fit. It does get tricky sometimes. We get crowded bicycle paths. This is something that I think people in North America don't really appreciate. Like, people will ride their bikes in traffic, and they'll think, oh, I can ride a bike in traffic. Riding a bike in bicycle traffic is a whole other thing, because
Mm-hmm.
bicycles are all over the place and they're passing, and they're like, we get bicycle paths that are very, very crowded here in the Netherlands. It'll be a 3 meter bicycle path, but it's like rammed with people riding side by side and passing and jockeying for position and everything. And it gets really tough. And when you add e-bikes to that, it can get very dangerous. So there are people here who are quite negative on e-bikes. I actually saw an anti-e-bike sticker on my way home today, which was very funny. People stuck it up on one of the stoplights. So there are people who are just generally anti-e-bike because of that. The majority of people are generally okay with the e-bikes as long as people ride them like reasonably. Don't ride them like assholes, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're doing generally the normal speed of traffic, but I have noticed that the average speed is increasing in Amsterdam, and that can cause problems on very busy bicycle paths. And that is the start of the problem, because that limit of 25 kilometers an hour is supposed to be a strict limit. But unfortunately, there are e-bike manufacturers that make it trivially easy to remove that limit. Now, if you're talking about like Bosch, which is a German motor brand, which is on the Urban Arrows and a lot of the high-end cargo bikes and a lot of the high-end bikes, it's really difficult to change that speed limit. But there are others, like there's a Super 73 that makes these fat bikes, and other fat bike manufacturers of fat bikes are these bikes with these big fat tires, and they have a flat seat, and they're like very impractical.
Now, make sure you distinguish for the North American audience here, because I brought this up back whenever there was a story that came out about it in August of last year, and I said fat bikes and talked about the problem
That's
there.
what they call them here in Dutch,
Yes,
and they call them fat bikes.
right. So, but over here, everybody started losing their minds because they thought that that meant any bike with fat tires. So,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a distinction here.
There's a particular type of style of bike, and it's a bit complicated. We used to have mopeds allowed in the bike lanes here in Amsterdam. They still are in many other parts of the Netherlands. And the reason for that is long and storied history. And when you see what they looked like when those laws were made, it makes sense. But now it's annoying that there are mopeds in the bike lane. They were supposed to be limited to 25 kilometers an hour. Everybody removed their speed limiters. Like basically 100% of what are called Snorfiets riders would remove their speed limiters, and they would go way faster than 25 kilometers an hour. Actually, it was weird when you ran into a Snorfiets that was going 25 kilometers an hour, because you're like, wow, he's going really slow. Like, it is almost 100% of people would remove the speed limiters, which caused huge problems, and they would go super fast, and they were a bit big and bulky. They were loud and smelly too. It sucked to be at a stoplight right behind one of them. So Amsterdam banned them from the bike paths, I want to say 5, 6 years ago now. It didn't solve the problem, but it's a hell of a lot better than it used to be. But the problem was that once they said, if you're on one of these mopeds, you need to go on the road, you need to wear a helmet, which you didn't have to do on these Snorfiets, and that were supposed to be limited to 25 kilometers an hour, you didn't need a helmet. So what happened was everybody sold their Snorfiets and bought a fat bike, because it was the same thing. These fat bike manufacturers, they shipped them as like a 250 watt motor, but it was software controlled down to 250. It was actually a more powerful motor, but it was limited. The speed could go much faster, but it was limited to 25 kilometers an hour. But you could literally just open the app and just click, I'm in a region that doesn't have a limit, or I'm in a region with a 35 kilometer per hour limit, or a 45 kilometer per hour limit. You just tick it off in the app, and boom, there you go. So approximately 100% of fat bike users would just remove all those limits, and they would ride them just like the Snorfietsen. And that thing just started again. And so now that's the issue that we're running into in the Netherlands. And the problem is that these have become kind of cool for teenagers. So you're getting like 13, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds riding these fat bikes with these big fat tires. They'll sometimes have throttles too, which are also not allowed. A e-bike in the Netherlands is not allowed to have a throttle. You have to pedal in order to control it. And there is a separate type of e-bike called a speed pedelec, which can go up to 45 kilometers an hour. It can have a throttle. It needs to have a license plate. You need to wear a helmet. But like a lot of these e-bikes that are very normal in North America would be considered speed pedelecs here because of the wattage of the motor, the speed that they go. And so they would need a license plate and they would need to wear a helmet here in the Netherlands. So I very rarely see speed pedelecs, except if I'm going between cities. I will then see them. But in the city, you'll almost never see them because they're not allowed to ride in the bike paths. And they've got the license plate where there are some cameras sometimes that will send them a ticket if they do. So the problem is we've got these fat bikes, a lot of them ridden by teenagers or the people who used to ride Snorfeets. Almost 100% of them have had the speed limiters removed. They go crazy fucking fast. 45 kilometers an hour when most people are going 16 to 20 is crazy. Like, that's a big, big difference. And even in Amsterdam, most of the streets now, even the streets for cars, are 30 kilometers per hour. And these guys are whipping along at 45 in the protected bicycle path next to them. So it is not a good situation at all.
It's going to be interesting to watch how the Netherlands handles this because in the story I read, of course, I was a little bit surprised at the way they were approaching it because they were a little afraid of potentially being too harsh or over-regulating some of these bikes. And I recall them talking about people who live in rural parts of the Netherlands where, your typical Bosch-powered bike may just not cut it, and that might wind up making them choose the car or needing more frequent transit service, which is another drain on resources. But it was interesting to see that they seem to be tiptoeing about figuring out, well, how do we regulate these better?
Yeah, there are a lot of complex issues that exist in the Netherlands that just don't exist in other countries because we have so many alternatives, bikes being one of them. But we also have microcars, for example, and we have Fietser, the scooters that go 45 kilometers an hour. And there's all these different things. And there are paths between cities that even the 45 kilometer per hour mopeds and the microcars are allowed on, because the thing is, they're not going to ride on the highway. There's no way you're going to be on one of those little mopeds or a microcar on the highway. And so they actually would like those people to be on these bike paths. And, we're talking 4 meters wide anyway. There is usually plenty of space. It's really not a big deal. There's not a lot of bike traffic between towns. And they would rather have people riding these microcars between towns rather than everyone having cars. So the Netherlands really does try to do a lot of things to stop people from driving full-sized cars everywhere, which definitely complicates things. But the national government was there was this whole thing a few months ago, or last year, I think it was, where the national government was trying to regulate fat bikes. And it was a bit of a shit show, to be honest, because they were trying to regulate fat bikes, specifically fat bikes, this style of bike with the fat tires and the flat seat. The seat is very low, too. It's very uncomfortable to pedal them because the seat is too low. And so your knees are way up there. They're really weird bikes, but it's a certain style of bike. And how do you regulate that style of bike? Do you say it has to have anything with fat tires, anything with this flat seat that can't go up? Because you know what's going to happen as soon as you regulate that. As soon as you say tires over 30 centimeters, they're all going to have 29 centimeter tires the next day, right? So I really don't understand why they were trying to regulate fat bikes specifically. But part of it was, I know part of it. There's a couple of reasons. One of it is because they don't want to overregulate e-bikes in general, because they really, really do want people to ride e-bikes, and people love their e-bikes, especially seniors who vote a lot, love their e-bikes. So they don't want to touch e-bikes. They don't want to tell people that they're forced to wear a helmet on an e-bike. They're forced to have a license plate on an e-bike. They can't ride in the bike lanes on an e-bike. That's the last thing they want to do, because e-bikes actually can work out really well, and there's a lot of people that really like them, and they can be great. It's just this issue of this outside of that. And so then they were looking at specifically regulating the fat bike. Some of it was also just the people that were doing it. There are the teenagers who ride them, which then they were saying we need a minimum age on it to bring it up to 16 or something like that. But also there are a lot of immigrants who ride these fat bikes too, because they come from places where you get these immigrants in the Netherlands who don't know how to ride bicycles, right? Because they've come from wherever, right? Some developing country. They've never learned to ride a bicycle because it's just not a thing that's done there. And so they come here and they don't know how to ride bicycles. And so you don't want these people driving either, though, right? So a lot of them would then go with the mopeds. And so you do find that a lot of the moped riders are immigrants and visual minorities, and a lot of the fat bike riders for the same reason, because a fat bike's easier to ride than a bicycle. The tires are super fat, and so it's hard to tip over. And especially when you got the throttle and stuff, it just goes. Like anybody can learn to ride one of these things within like a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so they become very popular. Then, of course, the far right government just loves to hate on immigrants. And so then there was certainly an element of this fat bike thing that was just like, we want these dirty immigrants off of our bike paths kind of thing. And I guarantee you that was an element of it, because you could read between the lines on some of the stuff these far right guys were saying, which is just gross.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, again, why I think that like fat bikes were being carved out on their own. I don't know. From my opinion, they just need to enforce the speed limits, period. And the problem is they are kind of doing that. The police bring out these things with this wheel on it where they like put the fat bike on it and then they see if it goes over 25. And if it does, the person gets a fine. It's really tough to enforce that though, right? To have the police out and everything. And this is the big issue with this. And this is the whole like a few people ruining it for everyone. This is why we can't have nice things kind of thing. Because like, how do you regulate that? With the Snorfietsen and the Bromfietsen, at least they had license plates. And so you could put up safe speed cameras and you could ticket them. But with the fat bikes and the e-bikes and other e-bikes, it's not just the fat bikes. I mean, the other thing was it recently went out of business, but there was a company called Van Moof that was the same thing. You just open the app, click, 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 and your speed limiter's gone. And it used to be that the Van Moof drivers would just be like whipping through the bike paths too. And again, if you regulated fat bikes out of existence, they'd just go to something like that. It would just be the next thing that easily lets you remove the speed limiter.
Yeah, of course, trying to enforce your way out of this problem is whack-a-mole, right? And then trying to regulate this problem away. That's why I laughed a minute ago whenever you talked about, if we ban this and set regulations at this, the market will just adapt. And I laughed because I've been looking at buying a drone and I've been learning a little bit about drones.
Yes, this one is 299 grams.
249 or 248 grams, because as soon as you hit above that, then you're getting into regulations brought in, at least over here, by the FAA. And the way the market skirts that is, the 249 gram drone, right? So we set regulations and rules, and the market's like, okay, well, here's what I'm going to do. And then they just get around. So it's going to be the same problem with bikes. Now, we were talking about throttles and talking about New York, and this is where you see it mostly. You see the demonization of just the blanket word e-bikes, especially coming out of New York.
New York is wild how much they hate e-bikes. It is in the news all the time. And even like normies I know who don't ride bikes in New York are like, the fucking e-bikes. It's crazy. Like New Yorkers are just completely flooded with anti-e-bike messaging. And I get it. I've seen it there. I've been there. I've seen the delivery guys like whipping down there at like 50 kilometers an hour. It's tough.
Well, and I know that they're making deliveries all day, right? And that's taxing on the body.
Well, again, I also put a lot of the blame on these platforms that put them under these intense pressure of this performance metrics where everything is tracked, right? Mm-hmm. Like if the last guy that did McDonald's to that building did it in 4 minutes and 36 seconds and you did it in 4 minutes and 59 seconds, like, what are you doing, right?
Yeah, and that's why I think everybody should just take the stance of fuck these apps. Yeah. I don't do it unless I'm in a pinch and I'm traveling. Otherwise, I'll go get my own food somehow. But you see a lot of these guys and they're pretty much never pedaling. They're always throttling. And then that brings up problems because, for example, I advocate for e-bikes and e-cargo bikes, but I generally only kind of push Bosch-powered bikes on people, which don't have a throttle. But a lot of people's perception of e-bikes is seeing some guy, doing 35 miles an hour with his throttled e-bike. And so throttles cause a problem here because the minute you say, well, maybe throttles are bad, then people get pissed. It's like, well, what about the people that can't pedal or can't get going?
What about some person with this one particular disability that they can ride the bike, but they can't ride this kind of bike and they can only do the throttle? And I'm like, really? This is what we're doing here?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like they want to people want to really get into it and argue about that. But like with most things, we can design our way out of these problems. I mean, we can have throttles on some bikes, but they should cut out at certain levels, responsible levels. I mean, helping mom get going with 2 kids on the back of her bike from 0 to 5 kilometers an hour, all right. But beyond that, no way. Or, helping a cargo biker, even though, I don't know, maybe who has just a massive load on and they're in downtown San Francisco and they need help to get going. Okay, you can have throttles, but they need to have proper design behind them. I don't think we can just have people throttling all over town all the time.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
I mean, the issue entirely comes down to how they're regulated, right? Because like I said, well, it's entirely the issue with people removing these speed limiters. And it is a complex problem for a bunch of different reasons. But I also think that there has to be some regulation on the manufacturers who put out a bike that is so easy to remove it on. Because the thing is, I don't think I have ever in my life seen a Bosch e-bike that was going more than 25 kilometers an hour without the person pedaling like crazy. Like, it just never happens. I don't even know how you do it on Bosch. I assume there's some method, but you probably have to hack the firmware and all this stuff, right? Like, it just doesn't happen.
Well, who's buying a Bosch, right? Who's buying one? Who can afford one? I don't think that they're looking to skirt speed limits there, so a lot of this is happening with those those sub $1,000 Chinese e-bikes and stuff like that.
I mean, you do get the problem of those Chinese imports for sure. I mean, the same thing, like e-bikes got a bad reputation in North America because of battery fires, right? And that was because e-bikes were so expensive there that people were buying cheap ones from China that don't meet safety standards at all. They're often, those really cheap ones are made with like old lithium cells that were thrown out because they were damaged in some way, and they cobble them together into a battery and sell it to North America for cheap. And yeah, they catch fire. That doesn't happen with a proper e-bike battery that is extraordinarily rare. But when you're buying these cheap imports, that's a problem. And so again, yeah, if you're buying these cheap imports with the controller that can have the speed limiter removed, it's the same thing. But I think there does need to be more enforcement on that because, like, again, I don't think we would have this problem with cars. I wish cars had speed limiters, by the way. Boy, does it drive me nuts when they start talking about the dangers of e-bikes while ignoring the giant elephant that is cars. But
careful. As soon as you say that, people love to yell, but they do have speed limiters, ignoring the fact that most of them don't kick in until about 120 miles per hour.
Right. The EU is changing that for what it's worth. We might finally be getting that. A lot of cars are having the mode where it detects, even like relatively inexpensive cars are detecting speed limits and throttling. You can still disable them for now, but cars are being built in the EU with this. It's been a few years now. That is going to happen. I like it. It's good. But, we don't have these problems with a lot of other things where like dangerous imports are stopped because there are regulations and they stop the dangerous shit from coming in. But that's not really happening so much with e-bikes. It is happening more so in Europe than it is in North America, though, I'll tell you. North America is like the Wild West of e-bikes right now. But there do need to be more regulations around those manufacturers who make it too easy. Like, again, Bosch doesn't have this problem, so Bosch can do it and make it basically not impossible, but incredibly difficult. Why are these fat bike guys allowed to come in and with a few clicks on the app, like, it's removed? That's bullshit. But I also think that, when the police see that this thing's been removed, it should be impounded. Not just a ticket. It should be taken away from them.
Right.
Like, yeah, you've got your 800 euro e-bike. It's gone now because you took the speed limiter off. Fuck you, right? Like, and I think we do need to be a bit more strict on that too.
Yeah. How many options do we need, right? So almost worldwide, I think we can kind of follow the way of cars a little bit with, how many companies do we need out there that make e-bike motors? We've got Bosch, we've got Shimano. Those are two very trustworthy and high quality manufacturers. Maybe we could get a couple more in there.
Bafang out of China is getting quite good too.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, they were not before, but
supposedly DJI is entering the game as well.
China's a huge market. I'm not surprised. Like, e-bikes are exploding in China. That's a whole other discussion.
Yeah. So we don't need knockoffs.
I mean, not literally exploding all the time, instead.
Yeah, careful
just
with
be
the
clear
words.
there.
Yeah. So to sit here and say, well, anybody that wants to have an e-bike should have to buy a Bosch is obviously going to create barriers because not everybody can afford that, right?
Yeah.
But we're going to have to come up with standards. We're going to have to come up with regulations, kind of the same way there is with cars, only let's control it better than cars. But it just can't be the Wild West for e-bikes as it currently is because it's completely killing the name of e-bikes by having for example, these Chinese fat bikes or whatever else, running around with limiters off, and suddenly somebody sees that and they think, you know, me on my Urban Arrows, the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not. So there's a lot of work to do, but this is still emerging. I mean, geez, I would say real momentum on e-bikes didn't happen till the pandemic, would you say?
Yeah, I would say in North America, it certainly took a big jump up.
Yeah. So governments are going to have to step in, I think, and we'll just have to kind of deal with the rubbish that made its way to the marketplace, over time. And there will be financial barriers to e-bikes, just like there are for cars, just like there are for everything else. That's why we're, I guess, canceling the 30-minute cities and going back to 15-minute cities so people can walk and take transit or an acoustic bike. Spoke way too early at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah, it's all over, man.
But yeah, also another thing I wanted to touch on too, something I've been seeing is as the e-bike and the e-cargo bike industry develops, they're starting to go the way of the auto industry with bells and whistles. Like the one thing that really got me going lately was, I know Recent Mueller's been pushing this, is having ABS on the cargo bikes. And some of the bike shop people that import these that have YouTube channels and stuff, they've done their best to say, oh, this is really cool and this would help this scenario and that scenario. But I'm just thinking, are you all just hitting your front brake? Is that it? Do you not have a rear brake? You brake front and back, controlled. I've never had a front wheel slip out on me. Not that it can't happen, but I don't see a point in having ABS on bikes because one, increases the cost of the bike. Two, it's something else to brake.
Yeah.
Three, we just don't fucking need it. I mean,
well, there definitely is this trend of turning e-bikes into cars. Like I've seen lots of them automatically unlock with your phone when you get close, and they have like trackers in them and stuff. The trackers can make sense for theft reasons, but they have all of these bells and whistles. And again, yeah, it does add to the cost, but it's also more stuff to break. Now, the other part of that is that it makes everything proprietary. And this is one problem that e-bikes have, that everything is proprietary. Because if you look at bicycles, they've kind of settled out. There are some weird parts here and there, but for the most part, an acoustic bike is an acoustic bike. And like you can pick up a wrench and a screwdriver and you can fix it yourself. You can learn in a day how to fix a bicycle. And it's very, very easy. And with e-bikes, there's a million things that can go wrong and all the parts are custom. And that is also a problem. And this is actually something like, because I come from an open source background on the software side, I definitely appreciate this. And I see from some of the open source community that I'm still part of, that there are people who are interested in e-bikes and they're very much interested in like open source components to e-bikes. And I can totally appreciate that there's some standardization, that the specs are open, that if the motor breaks, you can go buy the part that fixes it. And it's a standard part that you can buy online. And that's fantastic. Now, that gets into a whole other thing, because one of the other things I see with that community is the people who are into that also mod the hell out of them. And those things go like 70 kilometers an hour. So, that's the next issue with that is like, where does the regulation come in when people are building their own stuff from kits? And I mean, that's a whole talk about the Wild West. That is a Pandora's box. So, yeah, there is this issue with the proprietary nature of all these e-bikes, how difficult they are to fix, how then you start getting into the situation of like we had this thing called Bionics. I mentioned the cargo bike when we bought it in Canada. It was underpowered because it had the 250 watt motor, 25 kilometer per hour limit. It was also kind of a shitty e-bike system made by a company that didn't make great motors and stuff to begin with. So it was bad. It could not handle the hills in Toronto. It couldn't handle like the snow and the ice, and like it wasn't working. So we had it removed with a Canadian e-bike motor made by a company called Bionics, which is out of Guelph in Ontario. And Bionics was awesome. Like the power that was there, it still wasn't like an overpowered motor, but it had a lot of torque. It was just really powerful. It actually had regenerative braking, which is like totally not necessary in an e-bike, talking about stuff that is not needed. It really doesn't help that much. It's just a whole bunch of complexity that wasn't necessary. But Bionic...
Can I interrupt you there?
Yeah.
Because you brought it up, regenerative braking. I get that comment from people all the time.
Oh, yeah,
like,
I see it too.
Why doesn't this bike have regenerative braking? And I say, why would it?
It doesn't do shit.
And it's something else to break and fix.
Yeah.
So no, we don't need it.
Yeah, I had regenerative braking. I would go down hills and I would turn it on. That was neat and all, but like the amount of energy it generates after all the losses is negligible and definitely not worth the added complexity and cost.
Hmm.
Dumb.
Hmm.
But anyway, Bionics otherwise was awesome. Like their motor was so smooth, just the way that it would detect your movements and just slowly kick in. It felt like it wasn't even there. It was amazing. But Bionics went out of business. And Bionics design things in the worst possible way, as proprietary as possible. Every single component was like matched to each other. So the controller was matched to the motor, was matched to like the pedal sensors. Everything was like encrypted and the keys went between them. Totally unnecessary, totally bullshit that they did it. Whenever you replaced your motor or replaced a controller, the bike shop had to install special software, like we're getting into cars do now, where they have to plug it into the e-bike and sync it all to the servers. When Bionics went out of business, everything was fucked. Nothing worked
Oh,
anymore. So, like, we used our Bionics, but then as it started dying, you can't replace the parts because they're all proprietary and they all need this software that goes to a server that doesn't exist anymore. And one of the engineers at Bionics bought up a whole bunch of inventory at bankruptcy auction. And he had this, it might still be online, Bionics Legacy, it was called. And we used to buy parts from him because he was one of the engineers and he had disabled some of these checks. And so you could buy stuff from his Bionics Legacy site. And I kept this Frankenstein bike going in the Netherlands for a while, but eventually it died and I had to tear it all out. And that is another side of this e-bike thing that is just a giant mess. Like if your e-bike manufacturer goes out of business and it's a bunch of proprietary stuff, your e-bike is garbage as soon as it breaks.
hmm. Yep, yep. We definitely don't need that. And I even get annoyed at little things like, you know, Urban Arrow, their newest model, the Family Next or something like that. Finally, one of their engineers woke up and thought, oh, we should maybe put a suspension fork on the front. And I'm just thinking, no shit. But they decided it will only fit this new model. We will not make this so that it could go on the previous model or whatever else, right? So for something as basic as a suspension fork on a cargo bike, well, if you want that with Urban Arrow, you're going to have to pony up for the new one.
Yeah.
And stuff like that pisses me off.
Yeah, but that's the cycle we're getting into. And cars are the same thing, right? Like cars are getting all this proprietary shit and they want you to buy the new model. And I mean, it's the same as tech in general. It's just going in that direction. And this is where, again, the open source community that I'm part of is like, well, screw all that. We're going to have our own specs. But then again, they're all riding at 70 kilometers an hour, like whipping through the streets. And all of this is bad. Like, there's no one solution here that works really well. And again, to wrap up this conversation, because we have been going on for a while, like e-bikes are so awesome and they allow for so many opportunities and they keep so many people from driving or being on crowded transit and there's so many possibilities and yet I don't know what the future of this stuff's going to be. I don't know where all this is going to land.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen in North America? Are we going to have this niche crowd, which is growing, adopt and somehow afford e-bikes, e-cargo bikes, and they're just going to have to keep riding it on the current state of infrastructure that we have, which will not improve? Or will that be part of making the infrastructure improvement happen faster as more people get on these e-bikes and there's suddenly more people on two wheels?
I think e-bikes are making it, as I said earlier in the conversation, I think e-bikes are removing some of the objections because, like we mentioned, the objections of hills is basically gone now. And that used to be a super common one 20 years ago when I was doing advocacy, 15 years ago, whatever it was. That was very, very common. That one is gone now. The distances thing as well in suburbs and stuff where people are like, well, you know, it's 5 kilometers to the grocery store. There's no way I could do that on a bike. And the e-bike is also getting rid of some of those barriers. So I do think they're going to help that. But like North America really, really needs safer infrastructure. Like there's a lot of work to be done there. And it frustrates me when I see like Ontario going backwards and removing bike lanes and stuff. It's like, it's not good, not a good situation at all. Because none of this happens without safe infrastructure. Like you'll slowly creep up and it'll very slowly grow, but it's going to be a super niche thing until the safe infrastructure is there. That's just the fact. So again, I don't know where that lands.
I really think that it's going to help the movement. So had e-bikes not come along or e-cargo bikes, I think we would have kept going at the pace that we have been for decades. But I personally feel like this is accelerating it. It's
I
getting
agree.
more people on bikes and getting more people aware of the problems. And that can be from a lack of bike lanes to a lack of proper bike parking. And e-bikes, that's a whole nother discussion too. E-bikes come with a new set of details when it comes to bike parking as well that acoustic bikes, didn't have.
Yeah. And theft is a major issue.
Huge, huge.
Bike theft is already a problem in a lot of places, even for acoustic bikes. But like e-bikes, that's a whole other level.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of people even get nervous about, well, I would buy one, but I'm afraid it would get stolen.
Yeah.
And the insurance marketplace is still kind of a gray area. So, yeah, there's a lot to do, but they're helping. I think everybody should try one. I have to say this. One day I'm sitting outside a perennial cycle when I lived in Minnesota, sitting out back, summer evening, really nice. Two things happened in the span of 5 minutes that I thought was just so damn cool. So I'm waiting on my bike to get a new shifter cable or something. Doesn't matter. This guy pulls up on his Urban Arrow. He goes in and he picks up, I don't know, I think he was having his Brompton worked on. He brought it out, dropped it in his Urban Arrow, and, we exchanged some pleasantries, and then he just took off and went home. And I was thinking,
Right.
well, that was cool as hell. And then back behind me, I heard this lady come back from a test ride, and I heard one of the mechanics or the bike shop owner come out and go, well, how'd it go? And she goes, I felt like I had superpowers. This lady was, I want to say 60 years old, maybe. And she was giggly. She was kind of laughing. She said, I felt like I had superpowers. She bought that bike. I think it was a Gazelle that she was riding. It was an e-bike, of course. So it's changing minds. It's changing perceptions. And by God, if you test ride one of these things, you better be ready to buy it because that's probably what's happening. It's hard to ride one and then be like, oh, that was not fun. I don't see that happening. So more people are doing it. It's getting more people out. It's creating new insufferable advocates. It's a good thing. And we've got to support it. And we've got to work through some of these issues that are muddying the waters. But e-bikes are here. E-cargo bikes are here. They're not going anywhere. And this is going to be good. I'm going to go ahead and go out there and say by the year 3025, the United States will be the new Netherlands.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think e-bikes are great. I know they have their challenges, but I think we can work through them. I think it is really interesting to see how those problems are manifesting in the Dutch context versus the New York City context versus the rest of North America context and other parts of the world. But I think we can get through this, and I think they are a good thing. Even though, as I said, I almost never ride one because I still love that Oma Fiets, but that's only possible here,
Yeah.
So I think anywhere else, they are fantastic. And again, when we were in Toronto, our family would have bought a car, like, period. There's no denying we would have bought a car if it wasn't for electric cargo bikes. So, one less car, right? And we are certainly not the only people that I've heard from
Yep.
that were in that exact situation.
Exactly.
And whether your e-bike totally replaces your car, as it did with us, maybe that's less common than the second situation that I see a lot, which is people get rid of their second car to get an e-bike. So they may still have a car for long distance trips and all this when they need it, but they don't need a second car. And, that's also great too.
Yep. This is my last statement. If I can do it and if my wife can do this, have this life transformation, anybody can. We owe it all to e-bikes. Yeah, I said that kind of my life-changing thing was after my first trip to the Netherlands, but even with all that inspiration, it would have gone nowhere had I never found e-bikes because there's no way I could have made emulating a Dutch lifestyle work over here without that help.
Yeah.
And my wife never would have become the city cargo biking person that she is. She did not grow up on a bike in Brazil without e-bikes. So e-bikes are directly responsible for me continuing on the way I've done, my wife becoming what she is on two wheels, and us living the way we do with our 2010 car sitting downstairs in the garage, barely coming out, and we're fortunate enough to live in a city that tries with infrastructure.
Right.
And I would say we're doing 80-20, 90-10, maybe bike to car. So
Just make sure you rotate those tires on the car every once in a while, It's
yeah, absolutely. So e-bikes, I mean, I'm here talking to you right now because e-bikes help bring me here.
Yeah.
And without them, I'd be another motorist cussing about cyclists.
That's as good a place to end as any. That's very good. Yes, I am very much pro e-bike. I know there are issues. We'll get through them. I think they are an important part of the mix. And yeah, more people need to try them. Like you said, if you haven't been on an e-bike, somehow you got to the end of this episode and you haven't been on an e-bike, you should go to the store and just try one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're pretty great.
Yeah, and as soon as you say, whoa, did you see the price tag? How much you paying for your car? I swear that NJB guy did a video where he said it's costing $12,000 a year to own a car. So
I would say that considering that I sold my last car in 2013 and haven't owned one since, I have saved a shit ton of money, well over $100,000 because of e-bikes. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why you buy a new Urban Arrow every year and then throw it away December 31st. Yeah.
I'm still using that clunky, oh my God, that Bach Fietser that we bought in 2014 is on its last legs, but it's still going.
Isn't it also on a recall list?
Yeah, but don't talk about that. Babu wouldn't give me any money because it was too old. So now I only take it like little trips around. But yes, it was a recall. Anyway, good to talk to you, Brandon. Where can people find you these days? I guess Blue Sky is the place to go, right? I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. Just come over to Blue Sky, and occasionally over on YouTube, I still do some live stream rides. So, yep. All right. That's where you can find me.
Good. Take a look at American Fietser on Blue Sky and YouTube. And yeah, thanks for coming out. Good to talk to you.
All right. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much for listening to the Urbanist Agenda. As usual, all new episodes will be available early on Nebula. So if you're not already a Nebula subscriber, now might be a good time. You can sign up at nebula.tv/agenda. And with a subscription to Nebula, you not only support this podcast, you also get access to content by over 150 creators. That's everything from videos to podcasts to classes and more. Nebula is also constantly adding new Nebula originals, which are high-budget productions on a wide range of interesting topics. If you use our link, which again is nebula.tv/agenda, you'll get a discount on a yearly subscription, which brings it down to only $30 a year. I'm a big fan of Nebula, which is why all of my Not Just Bikes videos are available there, as well as some that are only available on Nebula, and of course, all episodes of the Urbanist Agenda. So if you're not already a Nebula subscriber, go check it out today, and thanks again for listening.